Hey friend, Graham here from recordingrevolution.com. Today, let's talk about synths and strings, how to mix them in 10 minutes. We're continuing our mix in 10-minute series, giving you my fastest, best go-to mixing tips for every single instrument. When it comes to synths and strings, I lump them together because they have a lot in common in terms of how I like to approach them and how I think about them in a mix. So here's a track that I did with my buddy Il Factor where he laid down a bunch of really cool synth tracks and some sampled strings at the end of the climax of the song. I'll play a smidge so you can kind of get a sense of what's going on. And then I'll show you two things I'm doing with synths and strings that will help them sit in the mix. And you can do the exact same thing.
We've got this fire burning up. We've got this flame that won't go out. We've got this fire burning up, won't go away. We've got this
A little taste of those little tracks. So that's the fun stuff we're talking about today. And there's two main things that I do when it comes to synths and strings, generally speaking. One has to do with EQ, one has to do with panning. So let's start with panning because it's a little bit easier. You don't need plugins for this to work. If you look closely, all of these tracks that Il gave me are stereo tracks, right? He's working in Ableton, and it doesn't even matter what DAW it is. Most of the time with a virtual instrument or a patch of some kind, it's going to be a stereo output. So we've got like this stereo string patch here. So he's got all that orchestral stuff happening. But a lot of times, if you have a bunch of stereo tracks, too much stereo will create what my friend Dave Pensado calls big mono. If everything is in stereo, you don't really notice the stereo spectrum. And so what I want to do when I get a lot of stereo tracks, especially synths and strings, is to actually collapse a few of those tracks to mono. And you see I've done this here. There's one called Big Synth, and I've panned it. It's two stereo, tracks basically. I've panned both pan knobs to the left. That's what the track sounds like. Which is very cool, and it has stereo ping pong. It's a beautiful stereo track, but it's one of many. And so I need to decide what elements do I really want to notice on the left and the right to create some actual stereo width. So I'm going to collapse this to mono so it's on the left. And then I'm going to put something across from it, which in this case is this brass track here. That should be stereo normally. But again, if that's up the middle or stereo and everything is up the middle or stereo, then you're not going to notice anything. So I pan that hard to the right, this hard to the left, and they play against each other. And then you can put other things that are stereo along with it, and it plays nice. You get a fuller, wider sound. So that's the tip number one, is when you got a lot of stereo synths and strings, collapse some of them to mono and pan them hard left and hard right and create a balance. Don't just leave them all in stereo. It'll just be a mess. The second thing has to do with EQ, and specifically the top end. So let's take a look at any of these tracks. Let's take the brass, for example. You'll notice I've got my SSL on all these tracks, and I'm doing a couple of things. I'm focusing on where does this track live in the upper mids or just the top range entirely, and giving it a boost. So this brass track by itself sounds like this. but I made it poke out a little bit at around 2K. I just gave it a little bit of a poke. So that's not very much. Let's look at the big synth over here on the left. So here I've got a boost at 6K. So I'm going a little bit higher in the frequency spectrum, and I've got a 6 dB boost. So let's do before. Making it poke out a little bit more where it's brighter at 6K. So I'm starting to make these things poke out in the uppers. Let's see about this guy. So here is the big strings. This is what it sounds like by itself. And what I've done is taken a shelf boost at 8K, which means 8K and everything above it, and I've boosted it by a solid 8 dB. Take a listen to what this does. You hear that air and that richness that comes to life? It's huge. It's so important to be able to have that edge of the strings that feels like it's a real bow going across real strings, because these aren't real strings, even if they're samples, right? So I'm doing a big shelf boost there, and that's going to be the secret sauce to a lot of these tracks. Let's go to this orchestral section here. Same thing. It's got an 8K boost at around 8 dB. I think I copied this exact same plugin. I'll bypass it, and we'll take a listen without. There it is. There's the life. And again, when you think about mixing, you got to not just think about the track by itself and what sounds cool. You have to think about the role that that track plays in the mix. So what is the role of strings and a lot of synths? It is to occupy a lot of the top end and the upper mids, and sometimes just the straight up mid range. I get it. But have that upper frequencies, that's where they live. That's where they create that sense of sparkle, that brightness that we all not know and love, whether it's in real strings or in, a pop track that has some strings that are sampled. We want that top end. So that's the place they need to occupy. So I find myself reaching for a shelf boost on the EQ, usually in the upper range. And when you add them all together, like I'm just going to grab the tracks that I did process with EQ, it really can make a difference. So let's press play and I'll turn them all on and off, just the EQs. Right, they come to life, and what's mostly important is in the mix. So let's do it now in context with the mix. I'll start with the EQs in, and then I'll take them out.
We've got this fire burning up. We've got this flame that won't go out. We've got this fire burning up. It won't go away. We've got this fire burning up. We've got this flame that won't go out. We've got this fire burning up, and we won't go away. We're not burning away.
There you go. That's how I think about mixing synths and strings in 10 minutes. Take stereo tracks, collapse them to mono, pan hard left and right, balance across the stereo spectrum. Don't have everything as a stereo track. And then think about high shelf EQs and upper mid EQ boosts to give each of those tracks the air, the life, the shine, the shimmer that they really, really want and that they want to occupy in your mix. I hope that's helpful for you. Let me know in a comment below how you'd like to approach strings and synths when you mix. Maybe there's a specific plugin that you like to use or a specific technique you like to use. Oh, and before you go, I want to give you my 8-step mixing checklist. This is my process of how I like to mix. I want you to have this step-by-step process. It's just a PDF that you can download and go through step by step how to approach your mix. So you're not randomly grabbing knobs, randomly grabbing plugins, randomly moving from instrument to instrument. There's actually a process. There is a system that I follow. It is 8 steps long, very linear, very clear. It's going to help you get a better mix, more consistent mixes, and you're really going to have a lot of fun with it. So I want you to download it. It's free. Just go to mixingchecklist.com. It's my gift to you. I'm also going to give you a set of multi-track stems from a song that you can download and import into your DAW of choice and practice mixing, and then a couple of bonus videos as well to help you on your mixing journey. So check it all out for free at mixingchecklist.com. I'll link to that below the video as well if you want to just click on that. And I hope you're having a great day. Make some great music, and we'll see you on another video real soon.